Question number 1 is dealing with the levels of development. The question says, what is the Human Development Index, HDI, and what does it determine? What is the infant mortality rate, the literacy rate, the life expectancy, the GDP per capita, and then how do these indicators reflect the development of a nation? Now what I put here is I put these different indicators. IMR I'm referring to as the infant mortality rate. LR I'm referring to as the literacy rate. LE I'm referring to as the life expectancy. GDP per capita I'm referring to as how the gross domestic product per capita. And then the HDI I'm referring to as the Human Development Index. Now, the infant mortality rate, what that means is that's how many babies are dying per 100,000, or per 1,000, I'll get it right eventually. How many babies are dying per 1,000 births? If you are a more developed nation, you want this number to be low. You want a low infant mortality rate because that means that a smaller amount of numbers of infants are dying per 1,000 births. If you are a less developed nation, this number will probably be high because that means that your medical system, that your health care is not doing very well and that many babies are dying at birth. The next indicator that we've got is literacy rate. If your literacy rate is a high literacy rate, that means that you probably are a more developed nation because that means more people can read and write. If your nation is a less developed nation, that number is probably low because that means not a lot of people can read or write within that economy. The next indicator that I have here is the life expectancy. If you are a more developed nation, the life expectancy is probably expected to be high because of healthcare. People are expected to live longer. If you are a less developed nation, your life expectancy is probably a low number because medicine-wise you're not doing very well and people are not going to live as long. The GDP per capita, the amount of money that people are making on average, figuratively, the average salary of a nation. If you are a more developed nation, you want this number to be high because that means more people are making more money, which makes the economy that much better. If you are a less developed nation, that number will probably be low because people are not making as much money. Now, the Human Development Index is measured kind of like a batting average. The higher the batting average, the better. The lower the batting average, the worse. A high Human Development Index is like 0.91. That means 91% of the time you come up to bat, you're getting a hit, which is really well. A low Human Development Index is probably around 0.60 and below. That means you're not doing very well. That is looking at your different types of levels of development. That's using specific indicators and determining how developed a nation is based off of those indicators. Question number 2 is dealing with the economic systems. The question reads, what are the 3 types of economic systems? What is the economic spectrum? Draw the economic spectrum accurately and describe what goes on the right, what goes on the left, and what goes on in the middle. Make sure you can label these nations, the United States, China, Monaco, North Korea on this spectrum. The first thing that I want to do is I want to identify the 3 different types of economic systems. The first type of economic system that we are going to look at is the free enterprise economic system, also known as, aka, free market economy. Okay, what that means is that the government has no control of the economy. The government is staying out of it. That's what that means. The next type of economic system that we're going to talk about is socialism. In socialism, you can kind of refer to it as 50-50, but what I more want you to get is the difference between big business and small business. In a socialist government, or in a socialist economy, the government is going to control big business. So at a certain point of workers that you have, once you reach so many employees, the government is going to take over and say, all right, at this point, we now control this. Because the government is wanting to control the economy a little bit, they want to make sure that it's regulated. And the way that a socialist nation does this is that they make sure that they control the main players within that economy. And the last economic system is the command economic system, also known as communism. 100% government control. That's what a command economic system is. Now, moving on to the second part of this question, we're actually going to label an economic spectrum. You're going to draw one out and actually label it. On one side, make sure you understand, always on the left of the economic spectrum, you have the command economic activity. Always on the right, you have the free market economic system. And always in the middle, you have socialism. 100% government control, far left. 0% government control, far right. Kind of you can refer to it as 50-50. Again, we're looking more like big business, small business, those types of things. That's what we're looking at. Your next question says to make sure that you can label these nations that we have, or that I've listed on the economic spectrum. Now, the nations that I've got, I'm going to look at my sheet here. The United States would fit somewhere in this area. Monaco would fit somewhere on the far right. North Korea, all the way on the left. And China is going to fit in between socialism and communism. Now, kind of adding to this, we can remember that the United States is more and more consistently moving more towards the left as the government takes over things like healthcare, and as the government takes over big businesses whenever they start to fall under, like during the recession. That means they're making decisions that move them more to the left. China is making decisions that's making them move more and more towards the right. They are consistently giving the people more control of the economy because they recognize that when supply and demand come into play, they make more money. Supply and demand is what determines what is produced here. That's important that you get that. Supply and demand, that is what's determining what is being produced here. The thing that's determining what's being produced here is the government. Government officials, the government body, that's who's making all the decisions in the economy. All right, question number 3 is dealing with population, and it reads, where is most of the world's population located? What is a population pyramid and what does it show? How could you see if a country needed to invest in the graying areas? How could you see if there had been an extended war? How could you see economic prosperity? And what will a less developed country probably look like? What will a more developed country probably look like? Those are the questions that we are going to be looking at in regards to this question. The first part, where is most of the world's population located? Most of the world's population is located in huge city centers. That is called urbanization. That means people are moving more and more to the cities than ever before, and because of this, the world's population is located in high city centers, in urban centers where people are going for jobs and for money. They're moving away from the farms and they're going to these areas. The next question reads, what is a population pyramid and what does it show? A population pyramid is what I have right here in the middle. A population pyramid is a bar graph that shows us age down the y-axis and it shows us gender on the x-axis. Always, 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 you have the males on the left and females on the right. That is always how it goes. And generally what you're going to see is a percentage of the population at the bottom and not the entire population at the bottom. This is what we did with this Lubbock and Wolford city maps. We figured out that data and determined percentages to look at Lubbock and Wolford's population pyramid. The next question says, how could you see if a country needed to invest in the graying areas? I've kind of drawn that here, but the graying areas are talking about the countries that have a high dependency ratio, and that high dependency ratio is in the retirement sector, in the graying areas. So if you had a bubble up here at the top, that meant that the country needed to invest more money in the graying areas because that area is the portion of the population where most of the people are located. So this government needs to invest money in their retirement systems, in providing a living for the people who are retired, but also they need to invest money in their economy as they're just about to lose all of these jobs where this big bubble is. So that's some things that this country is going to be looking at in the future as well. Next question says, how could you see it if the country had been in extended war? What you're going to see is a big gap in the male population. Depending on how long ago that war was, will depend on where that gap is in the male population. If that war was just maybe a couple of years ago, your gap is probably going to be down here in the area that would be fighting the war, such as 18 to 40. Okay, that would probably be where your gap is in your male side rather than up here. It just depends on how long ago that war actually took place. Next question says, how could you see economic prosperity? You can view economic prosperity in a population pyramid by finding the baby boom. In this one, you're probably looking at that graying area, which in this one, it's probably showing you the people during World War II or right thereafter, because as soon as people returned home from the war, from World War II, the economy really boomed and took off, and you saw economic prosperity by the baby boom, by the increase of population that's located up here. The next question says, what will a less developed nation look like on a population pyramid? What you're going to see on a less developed nation is you're going to see something that looks like this. You're going to see a population pyramid that reflects very high birth rates. High birth rates. It's also going to reflect very high dependency ratio at the bottom of the population pyramid. That means you're having a lot of kids and they're not surviving. If they do survive, some problems they're going to be having is, what are we going to do with jobs when all these people get up here into the working class? That's how you can see a less developed country. A more developed country will look similar to what that is. It'll look similar to what the United States is. You'll see one that doesn't have a lot of change. It does something like this. It doesn't change a lot. You don't have high dependency ratios. Those are actually pretty small in a more developed nation because there's not a whole lot of change. The population is not really increasing that much, and you don't really have a lot of disparity in a more developed nation's population pyramid. All right, at this point, we're looking at question number 4. Question number 4 reads, what are the 4 levels of economic activities? Where are people in the less developed countries located? Where are the people in the more developed nations located? Explain each level of activity. And then what is the difference between commercial and subsistence farming? And then what do they each require? So what we need is we need to understand what the 4 different types of economic systems are. The first type of economic system is primary economic activities. Primary or economic activities are the activities that require you to physically, manually get the natural resource out of the ground. What that consists of is this is where most of your less developed nations are located. And these less developed nations are the ones that they can't afford all of these high-end jobs. They can't afford the technologies. And so all they can do is get the resource out of the ground and then send it to somebody else so that they can do something with it. So that they could take the second economic activity, which is secondary economic activity, and you can add value to that resource that was taken out of the ground. This is where a lot of your less developed nations are still here, but a lot of your newly industrialized nations are found here as well. Once you add value to the resource, let me add that, less as well as newly industrialized. Once you add value to that resource, you need to be able to do something with it, which brings us to our third type of economic activity, which is tertiary economic activity. Tertiary economic activity is the third type of economic activity. It is your service industry economic activity. This is where your more developed nations are located. And again, this is the service industry. You're not dealing with any natural resources. You're selling it. You're a teacher. You're a doctor. You're a lawyer. You're people that have jobs that revolve around people. And that is what you are going to be doing in the tertiary economic activity. Now, our last economic activity, which is the fourth economic activity, is quaternary economic activity, which is the economic activity of the professionals. Now, this one is kind of tripping us up a little bit. This one is where your more developed nations are located, but this is more like your scientists, your computer programmers, the people who are doing research on stuff. That is where they fit on the different types of economic activities. It's important for you to understand that the more developed nations are located more in 3 and 4, and your less developed nations are located more on your primary and secondary types of economic activities. Now, moving on to subsistence versus cottage industries. Now, your subsistence industries, or your subsistence agriculture, this is the one where all you are doing is farming to survive. It would help if I spelled that right. You are farming to survive. You are not making a lot of money here. This is more of a hobby. This type of farming requires more workers because you don't have technology. This is going to be your countries that have a very high birth rate because the people are producing more kids so that they can work on these types of farms. Now, the opposite of subsistence farming is commercial farming. This type of farming, you are farming to make money. It is a large-scale type farming where you're using a lot of land and you're producing a lot of products, and it doesn't take a lot of people, less people, because of technology. There are less people in a commercial type agricultural business because you have more technology that takes the place of the actual people. Now, there's two types of industries. There's cottage industries and there's commercial industries. Your cottage industries are very small, just like this. You're not living off of that money. You may be making some money, but it kind of is just helping support things. This requires, this is more like your family as your workers. That's the workers that are around the cottage industry. When you think cottage, think small, like a little bitty house. When you see commercial, think large. You are in this business to make money, and you are producing a lot. These two are where your less developed nations are going to be. These two, your commercials, are where your more developed nations are going to be. And that wraps up question number 4. The what do they require? That's what I'm looking at here. More workers, less workers. A lot of family, not a lot of production. A lot of production, a lot of resources. That's dealing with question number 4. And finally, to your last question. Your last question is asking, what are the different types of government systems that we've talked about? Explain each one and give me a real-world example of each one. The first type of government system that we looked at was a democracy. A democracy was dealing with a vote. The only real example that we've got here is of Athens, because most countries combine democracy with a republic to form their type of government. The next type of government that we talked about was a dictatorship. This is where one person gained power by force and then took over. Your examples are Zimbabwe and Uganda. That's the examples of a dictatorship that we have in the real world today. Your next type of government system that we looked at was a monarchy. This is a bloodline. Power is inherited. A lot of times what you have in a monarchy is a constitutional monarchy, which this example is like the United Kingdom, because they have a monarch and they have a constitution that splits power between the monarch, the queen, and the parliamentary system, which is the elected members who make up that government entity. The next type of government is a republic. This type of government has representatives. This type of government, an example would be the United States. It is a democratic republic because we elect representatives that then make the decisions for us. Next type of government system is a theocracy. A theocracy is where there is zero separation between the church and the state. The church, the religion, runs the government. They make all of the decision, all of the laws are based off of that government, or based off of that faith, that religion. Our example that we looked at was with Iran. Iran has a theocracy. They also have a president who makes decisions, but the president makes decisions based off of what the church wants the president to make. Those types of decisions. And then the last, if I could spell, totalitarian. There we go. A totalitarian government has total control. They rule by fear. People have no choice. They're afraid to speak out against the government because they're afraid the government will do something and maybe get rid of them. Example of in the world today is in North Korea. They have a totalitarian dictatorship with the Uns. They're the ones that are in control. That is the type of government system that they have. Make sure that you can explain all 6 of those and that you can provide real-world examples for them.